Welcome to the Young Wealth Show, where you'll truly learn how to make, spend, and invest money for an awesome life. Get the real life stuff that wasn't part of your school curriculum. Young Wealth gives you innovative new ways of dealing with your finances, as well as the skills and tools you're going to need to survive and be successful out on your own. Let the Young Wealth Show be your GPS to take you from clueless to clued in. Here is your host, Jason Hartman, with Young Wealth.
Let's talk about a very important part of starting your financial life out well, and that is something that follows you around for 7 to 10 years at a time. It's something you want to manage carefully, and you want to do a good job with it, and that is, you know what I'm going to say, it's your credit. Your credit report, your all-important FICO score. And I've got a special guest with me here today. It's Danny Rosario with Starting Over LLC. He is a credit enhancement expert, and let's talk about how you can maintain, manage, enhance your credit. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason, for having me here.
It's great to have you. Tell us, for a young person, why it is so important to take good care of their credit. You know, I remember, Danny, when I turned 18, and I just instantly wanted to gain access to credit. So I remember I started out getting like the gas station credit cards, and then I'd get the department store credit cards, and then I'd get a MasterCard or a Visa, then an American Express, and use them very carefully and make sure that because I just knew that credit was so important as I wanted to be a real estate investor and be able to get mortgages and stuff. When someone's in college and they're 18 or they're 22 and they're just starting out in the career world, what should they know about credit?
Well, the important thing to know about credit is the fact that, especially now going forward, for anybody who's 18 years old or even in the future, credit's going to be a quintessential part of their life. So it's very, very important that they maintain it in a good standard. The best piece of advice that I would do is what you followed on getting a gas card or just getting a credit card is a great way to go. The problem is that as you get into college, you're bombarded with offers, banking offers. There's a current legislation actually right now that's trying to stop that from occurring with college students because there's such a big, huge credit crisis. You know, all this credit's available to you, and then the responsibilities and all the part of taking care of it.
They get into trouble.
Exactly. And that's the problem that we have. We have 80 million Americans that have a credit issue in this country. So the best piece of advice that I could give you is to start out with one credit card. It could be a gas card. It could be a regular credit card. The best one I would get is a secured credit card. And what that basically is that you open an account, because usually when you're first starting out, you don't have any credit history. So you open an account. You can typically get it at any major bank or a credit union, and open like a $300 secured credit card. What that is you're using your own money to open up the credit card. So you're basically using your money as a support system. So in other words, eventually what will happen is after 12 months of you making on-time payments, that will then turn into an unsecured credit card, which basically means that the money that's being given to you or the credit that's being given to you is no longer your own money. You're actually using the bank's or the institution's money.
And the secured credit card, I know that those are easy to get because if you deposit $500 or $1,000 at that institution, they'll give you a card. It's really just a debit card. Maybe it doesn't function mechanically the same way, but that's the way the bank's looking at it because they've got the money before you can't just go withdraw that money and keep the card, right?
No, you can't. Okay. You can't. I mean, but the thing is that when it comes to the credit end of things, it's going to look as though you have a revolving credit card. So it's a great way just to get started
That's
on the credit end.
Yeah, because on the credit report, that's the distinction you're making. On the credit report, it's reported like a credit card.
Right.
Debit cards don't show up on a credit report.
No, they don't.
Yeah,
People think that they do.
Or check cards, as they're called.
Right. You're using your own money in that situation.
Right. Okay.
So that's a great way to get started is just by opening one credit card.
Right. And are you saying that the reason to do this secured credit card is because it keeps you responsible and you don't get yourself into trouble, or because it's the only way you can really get it without a cosigner?
Exactly, especially because of the fact that you're starting at you're starting at 18 years of age. No one's going to give you a credit card if it's just by yourself without any established credit. So that's why you want to start with a secured credit card. The only difference to that would be kind of what we've talked about before, credit socialism, which is basically you sign up on your parents' credit card as an authorized user, and you're using their credit behavior to benefit your file.
Oh, but so that does go on your file too. It goes on yours and theirs?
Yes, it goes on yours and theirs.
Wow, okay.
So that can help you. The only caveat to that is that There's a current system called the FICO 08 model, which has negated that benefit. But it doesn't matter. Any way that you can establish credit would be great.
Good. What else should people know?
What you should know is that basically a credit score is established by the Fair Isaac Corporation. And all this number means
And that's what FICO stands for, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
FICO, or some people have, there's actually several different scores. But the most important one that everyone always uses is the FICO score.
What are some of the others? Just
There's Vantage Score,
Okay.
which is offered by Experian. There's the Vintage Score as well that's offered by Equifax and also TransUnion. The only problem with those credit scores is that they are actually propaganda by the credit reporting companies to establish their own score to get money. But the problem is that the lender never uses those bureaus' individual marketed scores.
Okay.
They only use the standard FICO score.
Right, okay.
So, when you're looking to get your scores, you want to get your FICO score.
And people should know that there are really 3 FICO scores when you have what's called a tri-merge credit report.
Correct.
There's a credit report that they might get from Experian or a credit report they might get from TransUnion. And those are just that company's report. But when they merge them all together, that's called a tri-merge report.
Correct.
And so everybody has 3 FICO scores. So it's even more complicated, right?
Exactly, yeah. And the reason why is that each one of the scores is based upon the information that's on your file at that time. That's why...
At that company.
Exactly.
And there are 3 different companies, right?
Right. There's Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax.
Right.
But the problem is that they don't always have the same information.
Right.
So it's very, very critical that you monitor your credit. It's just like you have to go get an oil change on your car. You should check your credit at least every 4 months, if you can, at least 3 times a year. Not once a year, because it could be too late then.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you keep on top of it.
Okay, good. There's more.
Yes, and well, the other
I know
thing,
there's more.
the credit score basically determines whether or not you, the consumer, is going to go 90 days late in the next 2 years. The scores go from 300 to 850. So the higher the score, the less likelihood that you're going to become a risk for the lender.
Okay.
So it's critical that you keep your score as high as possible.
Okay, so 850 is the highest, but
Yes.
very few people actually have an 850. 720 and above are generally considered to be a good score, right?
720 is still pretty good. The new magic number is 740.
Really? I always thought 720 was great.
720 is good. It's almost like getting an A minus.
Okay.
So if you're looking at getting a mortgage or you're an investor, you want to get an A plus. So that way you get the best points. You get 0 points and you get the best interest rate. So the higher you can get on 740 or 740 and above, the better you are.
The teacher's pet. Okay.
Exactly. So that's where you want to be, is you want to be at 740 or above. But most of us, when we first come out of college, or many of the individuals that listen to the show, starting at 18, you may start out with a score of like 620.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. The way to build that up is by opening up, your own secured credit card. And then, after 12 months, you wait until that one becomes an unsecured one. Then you can open up another unsecured credit card. And typically you want to have at least 3 credit cards, 1 mortgage loan, and 1 auto loan. That's usually the nice balanced file. So for those of you that are listening, that's really the best way to get started. Start out with 1 credit card, and it doesn't have to be $500 or $1,000. You can open up as low as $300, and you just want to make on-time payments. And you will be surprised on how much your score will go up, even with having a $300 credit card.
So here's what some people listening might be thinking, Danny. They might think, gosh, I don't want to get myself into trouble with credit. I want to be really responsible, and I want to start life right. So I'm not even going to take any of those credit offers I see on campus. That's actually kind of a mistake, isn't it? Because you want to have credit. You got to have credit to build credit. But you just got to use it right and be prudent and careful with it, right? I mean, don't turn down every offer. You need to take an offer or two, just 1 or 2 of them, right?
Right, exactly. And I think that's a really great point. I think you just have to think about it as anything else that's financially wise, or to be financially responsible or fiscally responsible, which is, if you know that you have 1 credit card, treat it like if it's you're your own bank. Because if you know that you have too many credit cards open, you're responsible to more entities. So you want to start out with just 1 and then work your way out from there. The problem that many people make, or the mistake that they make, is the fact that they open up multiple cards, 2, 3, 4 cards within a 12 to 24 month period, and then you're losing control. So you have to have a budget in mind. If you know you have a $300 of a credit card available, and then you open up another one. Just make sure that you keep a tally of exactly how much you're accruing. It's just like the debit card, for example, is a perfect example. There's good things and bad things about debit cards. The good thing about it is that it teaches you how to be responsible, because if you know you only have $1,000 in your checking account and you're using your debit card, you obviously have to keep track of all your expenditures. The problem that you make a mistake of is when you lose track and then you've got non-sufficient funds fees and you're going negative, and that's not a great way to get started.
Right.
You start out with that debit card that you've had, apply the same financial principles with the credit card. If you're going to use $150 in your credit card, that means that you have $150 in your checking account. The best way to do it is to have another account that you know you're going to pay your credit cards with. So if I use $150 today, I know that I'm going to pull out $150 from my checking or savings account to pay that debt.
Right.
So I have that money set aside to pay it the next month. So when I get the bill, no problem. I'm just going to go into my credit card checking account that I have to pay my credit cards.
But Danny, what about retail therapy? I mean, what if someone listening likes to shop? They like new clothes. They like all the cool gadgets. What do you do then? Is there a responsible way to enjoy the finer things in life and have a payment and carry a balance? Or is that just a complete mistake? I think it is, because of the darn interest rates these banks rip you off. They charge, it's outrageous. And maybe we can talk about some of the scams the banks pull when you carry a balance. But is there a responsible way to have a credit card? And, when you're just starting out in life, you have nothing. You got to buy some clothes. If you have a new job, you've got to get some business attire that you've maybe never owned before. You've got to get yourself maybe decent transportation. I don't know. Just asking.
Well, part of the credit score is that it looks at how much your debt to income ratio is.
Your DTI.
Your DTI.
Okay.
And basically what that means is how much debt are you carrying versus how much you're bringing in, for all the listeners who are listening. What you want to make sure that you do is, if you're carrying a balance, you don't want to max out the credit card, because remember, you only have one credit card, right? So if I max it out at $300, it makes it look like I'm in over my head. My debt to income ratio is 100%.
It's better to carry a 50% balance on two cards than 100% on one?
Right. That would be good under current standards. I'd try to keep it down at least 10%. Total. So, for example, if you
10% of the limit.
10% of the limit, carrying it over.
If you have a $1,000 limit and you have two cards with that, you have $100 on each.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, granted, if you decide to pay it off at the end of the month, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
But you just don't want to carry that amount of debt for long periods of time.
So try and pay it off. If you carry it a couple of months, it's okay, but then pay it off completely and then go a couple of months paying it off every month. And then if you have to, you don't want to do this. This is not ideal. Have the balance again, just like you said, but then get rid of it in a couple of months. Just because they allow you 10 or 12 months or whatever time to pay it doesn't mean you should take that long, right?
No, I mean, you want to pay it off as soon as you can, preferably. But if you decide to carry the balance through, that's not bad either, because the credit score is also studying to see how you can handle debt over periods of time. So if you are carrying, let's say, $300, for example, can you carry that debt over, let's say, 3 or 4 months by paying it on time? Versus, I'm just going to pay it off at the end of the month, which is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. But also, if you can establish both, where you're actually, let's say, for example, that it's $300 and you give yourself 3 months. Okay, so you make 3 $100 payments. And that would work fantastic, because the score, remember, the credit score and the credit software, it's not human. It's a software program. It's a computer formula. So it's just studying to see how you carry those balances. It's all mathematical. So if you decide to do that, that's perfectly fine, to pay it over those 3 months or even over 2 months. Maybe you decide, okay, so this month I'm going to pay $150. That's 50%, right? Mm-hmm. And the next month I just pay it off. That's perfectly fine too.
All right. What else should people know?
You should also know that your credit score is also based upon 35% of your recent payment history. That's why it's very, very important, even when you're getting started, that you not pay any payments late. You want to be on time, especially during the first 12 months, because it's almost as though you were...
That's the probation.
Exactly. It's probation period.
Right.
So you don't want to mess up the first 12 months. That's why starting out with one card, like we talked about, Jason, is the most responsible way to do it. So you get used to having a credit card and knowing how to pay on that credit card.
Right.
So don't be late the first 12 months. Don't be late ever. Because remember, if you do become late, that stays on your record for 7 years. and that will follow you. And 35% of your score is based upon that. Then from that point, another portion of your score, another 30%, is based upon how much of your credit mix you have versus, like we were talking about earlier, which is you have a credit account, you've got an auto loan, and then you also have a mortgage loan. So you want to make sure that you keep that mix going. 10% of your score is based upon your credit history. That's why it's always important not to close any accounts.
Okay. All right, cool. We got a couple more minutes here. We try to make these shows short and concise. So there's 3 things when it comes to borrowing, the 3 C's of credit, they call it. And one of them is the character. And that's really what the credit report tells, right?
Yeah, it's a behavioral characteristic. Yeah. So if a person has a really low score, it's showing bad character traits.
Yeah,
exactly. You're a flake.
Yeah.
You had some issues. And this doesn't mean that some catastrophic event happens to you in your life. That's a whole different story.
What about that? What about explanations? Do they view it like, hey, the dog ate my homework? Or is there really a valid explanation to a lender? Or it just depends on the lender. It's case by case, right?
You're absolutely right. It just depends on what situation happened. That's why it's always important that you keep your credit in good standing, because if something catastrophic does happen, it's going to show, okay, looks like he went late a lot in 2006. So Jason, what happened in 2006? Did you lose your job? Did you go bankrupt? Did you have diminishment in your business?
Did you have an illness or something?
Yeah, something.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That's typically feasible and explainable because obviously it's a life event that you went through. So, and maybe sometimes that can happen for a little bit of time, but that doesn't mean, and this is where I want to really hone it down, it doesn't mean it's the end of your life if something does happen in your credit life. You will hear on the news and the media hope and fear all the time. Oh, your credit's bad. Okay, so that's the end of your life. That's not the case. So if you're listening...
Well, that's what you do. You help people enhance their credit, right?
Yeah, I help them enhance it. I'll help them restore it if they had some kind of life event, because there are 2 laws that protect the consumer. There's the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and there's the Fair Credit Billing Act. And if the bureaus don't follow those 2 acts to the T, that's where the consumer has all the right to make sure that that information is corrected.
Hey, let's talk about some of the abuses here. And I know that Obama administration is making some new laws and so forth, but most of these things are like window dressing, man. They don't really change much. These credit card companies really abuse people. And I mean, it is disgusting what they're doing. Whereas interest rates effectively can turn out to be 33%. I mean, it's insane. What do? They do this thing where they're like tying cards together, where they notice if you're late on one, you might think, well, that's just one credit card. I got these other 2 credit cards, and those have nothing to do with this other one over here that I'm late on. Not true, right? These are all looked at together because their computers are constantly checking your credit report, right, to see how you're doing on your other bills?
And you're absolutely correct.
Wow.
So that's why it's important that you make sure that you keep everything on time, that you pay everything on time. Even if it's the minimum balance, pay the $15 bill. Mm-hmm. Don't fall behind, because you're absolutely right. Computers, they're always pre-screening your credit report. So you're right. If you have 2 accounts, a Chase and American Express is late once in your 5 years ago, and all of a sudden today Chase decides to run a credit report or a credit screen, and because of the fact that you were late 5 years ago, all right, bing, computer goes ahead and goes from 8.9% to 25.6%.
Whoa, man, that's crazy. What about late fees? And I mean, it's the late fees and the interest rate, right? It's like the blend of these things.
Yes, and usually both of them go up.
Yeah, and what they do is they can go back and on the balance you carry, or I can't remember how they do that, but it's just totally like abusive. Most people, they never read their credit card agreement, so they don't know what they're in for. And even if they did, it's hard to understand unless you're in law school, right? So it'll go back and it'll take and impute like all these other charges retroactively, and it's just crazy what they're doing, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a big abuse and a scam, and we'll see what happens with Obama and the legislation he's trying to pass through to protect the consumer.
You know what the problem is, though? They all say, well, protect the consumer. But, that doesn't happen in a vacuum, okay? These credit card companies, if you take away all their incentives, then there's just less credit out there. That's what most people don't understand. This is not a zero-sum game, any of this stuff. If the government attacks them Sure, that's great, but then usually what will happen is some vendors will disappear from the marketplace and there's going to be less competition, is ultimately what it usually is the result of that.
Right, and it turns into more of a monopoly.
Which is bad, too. It's even worse sometimes.
And, you're starting to see the abuse now because all of the credit card companies are rushing to do all these fees before the legislation actually gets passed.
Like next February, I think, or something, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Well, what else do people need to know? I mean, there's so much to this. This is a big topic.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that you really have to consider is making sure, like I was telling you earlier, do not close your credit card accounts. Whatever you open, keep them open.
Forever?
Forever.
Okay,
Don't ever close them.
So if I got a Macy's card and a Exxon gas card when I first started out, and I'm now 25, 27 years old, and I don't use those cards anymore, I should still keep them open?
You should still keep them open, yeah, because a portion of your score is based upon your credit history. So what many people do is that they'll never open an account that they've had, let's say, for 20 years, and then the issue comes about that they're not using it anymore, and it actually would benefit them to use that card, at least just to go buy $10 worth of gas. Wait till you get the bill and pay it off.
So the point is with cards, like with your muscles and your brain, you got to use them a little bit.
You're absolutely right.
That's really what you're saying, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Huh. You don't want to have them go dormant.
Dormant card is bad for your credit report.
Yes, because potentially what's going to happen is that they could close it on you. And that's what's happening in today's world. People who have stellar, perfect credit are having their credit cards shut down, their credit limits reduced. And it's because of the fact that they're looking at what they call credit utilization. And they're determining risk. So if you're not utilizing all the credit that's available to you, well, looks like Jason really doesn't need $100,000 worth of available credit. So we're going to go ahead and cut it to $50,000.
So use it or lose it.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, interesting point. Now, on that thing, does it matter if you close it or the credit card company closes it, or it's the same, it's bad either way, right?
Great question. Actually, it's better if the credit card company closes it rather than you closing it.
I would think the other way, almost.
No, because here's what happens is that most of the times if it says on your credit report, credit closed at credit grantor's request, well, you could probably have a perfect history because that's what's going to show on there. But maybe the credit card closed it for a number of numerous reasons. So if you've obviously been stellar the whole time, that means that maybe they just decided to close it because you did go dormant or you never used it. And so needless to say, that does affect your score to some extent because of the fact that you're reducing the amount of available credit, which is why I was saying earlier that it's important to keep that debt-to-income ratio around 10% or less. Reason being is that if that does happen to you, it won't affect you as much. Because remember, you're utilizing less credit.
Right. Okay. Good point. Yeah. Okay. In closing, what's the final couple of thoughts here?
Well, the first thing that I would definitely do is to definitely have one credit card account, pay it on time for 12 months, then open up a secondary credit account, see if you can get yourself an auto loan, and eventually set yourself up for a mortgage loan. Typically, you can usually do that within about the first 3 to 4 years. Even people who come into this country who are trying to become citizens and get their Social Security number, that is another way of establishing a credit account. I just helped somebody recently with that. And within 2 years, Jason, she went from a 650 to now a 758. Just because she followed that. She had a $300 secured credit card, told her to have that for 12 months. Then she opened up another credit card, then got an auto loan. Now she's ready to get a mortgage. So wherever you start, you just want to make sure to be responsible about it. Second of all, make sure that you also, as you establish your credit, make sure you check your credit scores. Go to myfico.com. That's the major organization that does the FICO score.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah, where can people get their credit report? How often should they look at it? And that freecreditreport.com website, I hear that's a scam, by the way.
It is a free...
Because it enrolls you automatically in a paid service or something like that. There have been some upsets about that.
All those commercials that you watch on TV, disregard them, okay? Because those are all marketing scams by
Folks,
each one of the
this is really
lenders.
good advice.
Yeah, it really is. All that stuff that you see the guy on the guitar playing freecreditreport.com, True Credit, or Ben Stein coming now and having this free credit report, all that stuff on the television, completely tune it out. What you need to go to is right directly to the horse's mouth, which is you go to www.myfico.com/12. Right there, you're getting it right from the FICO organization. You'll be able to get 2 out of your 3 credit reports. Because remember, there's 3 bureaus. You can get TransUnion and Equifax. You can get your FICO scores from that site. The only one you won't get is Experian, because Experian in February, on Valentine's Day of this year, they decided to basically negate the consumer from being able to see their true FICO score from the FICO organization. So you can get at least 2 of them. That's another lawsuit that's currently pending. But that would be the major source to get it from. If you want to get yourself out of being sent insurance offers, credit card offers, go to another site called www.optoutprescreen.com. That's OPT, outprescreen.com. That will actually get you out of everybody's pre-screen offers. You'll notice that your mail will become even less with all these offers that you get in the mail. And also it will help you too. Because remember, once you have credit, established credit, you can go ahead and seek credit out on your own and then get the rates and the offers that benefit you.
Good. Hey, that's excellent advice. Danny, give out your website if you would.
Yeah, my website is www.startingcreditover.com, and you can find a lot of educational material on there because I love to teach. There's an 11-minute short video on credit, exactly what we kind of talked about today, but in further detail that can help anyone. That's where I'd get started, and there's also some other articles, and you can keep up on what's happening in the credit world. And for those that need some assistance, I can even consult them further.
Excellent. Hey, Danny Rosario, Starting Over Credit LLC, thank you so much. Awesome information.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Copyright the Hartman Media Company. For publication rights and interviews, please email media@jasonhartman.com. This show offers very general information concerning real estate for investment purposes. Opinions of guests are their own. Jason Hartman is acting as president of Platinum Properties Investor Network exclusively. Nothing contained herein should be considered personalized, personal, financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Every investor's strategy and goals are unique. You should consult with a licensed real estate broker or agent or other licensed investment, tax, and/or legal advisor before relying on any information contained herein. Information is not guaranteed. Please call 714-820-4200 and visit www.jasonhartman.com for additional disclaimers, disclosures, and questions.